Hush Hush was developed and produced by Sad Panda Studios and is the follow-up game from the very successful dating sim Crush Crush. There is also a game called Blush Blush, where you save guys instead of girls. I included the link below to Sad Panda Studio website, so take a look below. Hush Hush is a branching narrative dating and romance sim with soft core elements. The game is 17 plus unless you pay for the 18 plus DLC. The 18 plus DLC includes nude renders and some animations. We will discuss this further in the adult or not safe for work section. I've seen this game described as a harem game, but based on the story and other elements of the game that I don't want to give away, I really just consider this a dating and romance sim with branching narrative elements. You're dating a lot of the girls, but it's not quite to the harem level in my opinion. If you disagree with that, please explain your reasoning in the comments. This game starts off really lighthearted and can get serious and dark as time progresses, but we'll discuss this a little bit further in the story section, so let's get on to the game's visuals. Hush Hush's art style includes more than a few animations, but is still mostly static renders. The game does a good job transitioning from slightly different perspectives, which I think really helps give the game some depth and can help make some scenes unique. There's an example when you meet Mio, one of the characters for the first time, that is different in style than some of the others. Unfortunately, this art switch doesn't happen as often as I would like. Don't get me wrong, the game does look pretty, but it's just not particularly unique in the dating sim genre, so I'm going to give visuals 2.5 out of 3. Now, I've played other games where they switch art styles to try to add to the atmosphere, and it just doesn't work very well. However, Hush Hush I think does it with great effect. I wish it happened a little more often, but I think it's done very well, and so I'm going to give that a good score for consistency, 3 out of 3. Next, let's move on to the audio. The music is decent and sets the atmosphere fairly well. There were times where I was tapping my foot to some of the background songs because it was catchy, but I'm definitely not going to listen to the music outside of the game. With all that said, the music serves its purpose. It's not terribly special. It gets an average score, 2 out of 3. Now, let's talk about the sound effects. Sound effects in the game are pretty standard. They don't subtract from the game, but are nothing really special. So I'm going to give sound effects an average score, 2 out of 3. Next, let's discuss the voice acting. This is the first game on my channel where we can discuss voice acting, so let me play a couple of scenes here so you can actually hear it.
Right? I mean, that's exactly why I'm working here. Okay, I'm all for the direct approach, love. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I didn't really get a good look at you before I gave you that little love tap on your face. The good news is, you're kinda cute.
Ugh. I'm never going to hear the end of this one. Eli already has to help me with my makeup and hair. Now it's going to be my wardrobe, too.
So these are just a couple of examples. The voice acting in this game is extremely well done. I was comparing some of the voice acting in this game to Dragon Age, Mass Effect, those types of AAA games, and it stands up to all those games. And in some ways, I actually found it to be potentially better. The voice actors did a fantastic job really bringing these characters to life. Each character spoke in their own way and were completely distinct in manner and tone. I was very impressed. The voice acting gets a 3 out of 3. I mean, I can't say enough about the voice acting in this game because it really did set the tone and the atmosphere better than pretty much any other aspect. So that's a very solid 3 out of 3. Next, let's move on to story. And this is where Hush Hush really shines. Each character and many side characters have an in-depth story and really feels like most of the characters have a life outside of the game. Many narrative games don't do this well, and it feels like the characters are there simply to prop up the main character. Hush Hush is not like that. You are there to influence the girls' lives, but they had lives before you showed up. This really adds to the engagement. The writing is polished, and the game does a good job reflecting the personality of each of the women. The writing gets a 3 out of 3. And because of all these, the voice acting, the story, the writing, the engagement is also a 3 out of 3. Like, you are invested and engaged in the story, which I think is fantastic. Hush Hush does it very well. It is very clear that the story is determined also by the choices that you make. The player has a lot of agency in the story and all the possible endings. So also agency is 3 out of 3. As I stated earlier, the characters are all unique and it feels like they have real lives outside of just what's in the game. This is probably due to each character having a history with the developer's previous game, Crush Crush. You can tell that each character has a backstory which was really engaging and fun. There's even a genderqueer or gender fluid character which is available to go on a couple of dates with. However, some people may be turned off by the main characters because they are kind of walking stereotypes. There's a cute gamer girl, there's an athletic girl, the kind of princessy girl, there's the soft-spoken but kind girl, and I would have to say that yes, this is true. The characters are pretty much walking stereotypes until you get to the darker parts of the game. The girls have secrets that you have to unlock or figure out through proper dialogue choices. This adds a lot of depth to the characters, which may seem shallow at first. I found myself really invested in the characters and looking forward to figuring out their secrets. Sad Panda did a good job making these stereotypical characters seem real, so I'm going to give characters a very solid 3 out of 3. Okay, now moving on to atmosphere. The main character's on vacation to a tropical island. It feels like that. The characters in the setting do a good job to enhance the consistency and immersion of the setting. While there are other games that are set on an island, it really feels like this is a specific place. What the game does well is shift tone. The game starts out lighthearted and fun, but does get darker and it adds more pressure. And you actually feel this through a number of the different graphical ways that they do that I'm not going to give away, and also finding the secrets that the girls are hiding. This does actually help with that kind of darker tone, so I give consistency and immersion a 3 out of 3. However, Tropical Island Dating Sim is not unique. I feel like the setting is done very well, but since it's not terribly unique, I'm going to give it an average score 2 out of 3. Let's move on to the mechanics. There are a few mechanics to touch upon. The dating aspect of the dating sim is pretty standard in these kind of dating games. You select the correct choice to get the best date. In Hush Hush, you get a letter grade for each of the possible 4 hearts you unlock through dialogue, and you get a letter grade on top of that, up to an A+. To get all 4 hearts is actually pretty challenging at times. You can also unlock the girls' secrets and special renders. The secrets can get very dark. I found myself feeling a lot more for the girls and their story than I thought I would when I first started playing. The dating aspect is fairly easy early on, but does get more difficult as time progresses. There were multiple times where I went back to a date to try to max out the date to get all 4 hearts and all the renders and the secrets. To help you do this, there's a fortune teller where you can pay to give you a reading every day that will give you a tip or a hint on how to progress. Now, some of these hints are more valuable than others, but overall, I was invested in actually seeing all of them. Outside of the basic dialogue choices during dates, there's an RPG aspect that allows certain types of dialogue choices to be unlocked if you have the right stats. There are main stats shown here, and there's also dark stats below. You get 2 choices per day to either level up a stat or to work to gain money. To access the better paying jobs, you have to have higher stats. You need money for dates, so you can see how all these systems kind of work together. Luckily, when you actually use your stats for particular dialogue choices, it also levels them up, so you're not just having to rely on those 2 times per day to either level up your stats or get money. The mechanics aren't complicated, but it does add another facet to what would be kind of an average dating sim. These mechanics separate itself from the basic dating sim, so the fun repetitiveness scale gets a good 3 out of 3. For importance, it also gets a 3 out of 3. If you don't meet certain requirements on dates, you may not get a particular outcome or access to the adult content. If you screw up a date, it can actually affect the endings you get, but it's not always clear on how it will affect your relationships with all the girls. So all in all, these mechanics are very important. The individual aspects of each mechanic is not unique, but the way all the individual mechanics were tied together were really well done. So while not unique, how they were put together was quite impressive, so for how unique the mechanics are, it gets a 2 out of 3. Lastly, let's talk about the not safe for work or adult content. This is where you might get turned off a bit. The game's lewd content is only accessible by purchasing the 18+ DLC, which is around $6, and that unlocks the nude renders in some animations, which are either girls in sexual positions swaying or masturbating. That is the extent of the lewd content. If you are used to playing adult games, then this is probably going to be disappointing for you. The quality of the adult content is fine, but some of the renders or animations have the characters move in odd ways, which can be atmosphere breaking. I wish I could show you some of these examples, but you know, YouTube. So I give the quality of the adult content a 2 out of 3. The amount of adult content is pretty disappointing. I did wish there was more adult content and that it showed more. The game alludes or describes the sexual content without the renders matching what is described. I'm giving the amount of adult content a poor 1 out of 3. Hush Hush is a good game. The characters, setting, writing, and voice acting were really strong, and I did find myself becoming invested on the dates with the characters. However, the DLC was just kind of a tease that left me feeling left down. So it really shines with its characters and story, but is a bit light on the adult content. I didn't feel like the 18 plus DLC was quite worth the $5.99 cost, and is a good dating sim without it, but you will have to decide for yourself. If you like dating sims with well done characters, you will like this game. If you're playing this game hoping to hit pay dirt with the loot content, you'll likely be disappointed. If you like my review, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow the channel a bit, and every like helps. Thank you so much for the support, and see you all next time.